For the Liberals, Ms. Jasek, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. And I will be splitting my time with MP Zuberi. Mr. Bachrach didn't take me up on my offer of time. So, Minister, let's turn to the main estimates. We do see that there's an 8% increase, and you've alluded to some of the main drivers. The area I'm particularly interested in is the whole incentives for zero emission vehicles program. Obviously, being part of a government that knows that climate change is real, this is particularly important. I know it's very important for my constituents as well. So could you give us a few more details about the incentives for zero emission vehicles program, particularly how much does each ZEV on the road contribute to reducing greenhouse gases in terms of emissions per year, and how many businesses, how many Canadians have actually benefited from the incentive program?
Mr. Alghabra.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for that question. This is an important part of my mandate. Look, if we are serious, and we are serious about climate change, because, by the way, again, we believe that climate change is real, and it's a crisis that needs to be dealt with. The transportation sector is the second largest source of emission into our climate. So it is, if we are serious about climate change, we need to reduce emissions that come out of the transportation sector. And that's why the program for zero emission vehicles to create an incentive for consumers is a fantastic program that supports so many Canadians and businesses, and by the way, the auto sector as well. The idea behind it is to provide incentives where consumers and businesses can receive an incentive to help them maybe move up the decision to purchase a zero-emission vehicles had they otherwise maybe been hesitant to do so. This will increase the numbers of zero-emission vehicles on the road and accelerate its adoption. This will stimulate the auto sector by increasing the demand for those zero-emission vehicles. And equally importantly, it will reduce and remove emissions. By the way, each ZEV, or zero-emission vehicles, prevent 4 metric tons of greenhouse gases of emissions per year. And to her other question, 79,000 Canadian and Canadian businesses have benefited from this incentive. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Minister. Ms. Jasek.
I think I'll turn it over now to my colleague, MP Zuberi.
MP Zuberi, the floor is yours.
Monsieur le ministre, d'être ici avec nous aujourd'hui au committee.
Thank you very much for your work.
All area member and as a Quebecer, about the REM, also known as the Réseau Express Metropolitain, and the station that's being built at the Montreal Trudeau International Airport. In addition to that, could you comment on what's happening with the proposed high-frequency via rail train between the Montreal-Toronto corridor?
Thank you, Mr. Zuberi. Minister?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to my colleague for his work and his question. Let me first state the obvious. The REM project is incredibly important. It enhances public transit in the Montreal region, and it is in sync with our objectives of increasing the utility of public transit and reducing greenhouse gases. We are, the Department of Transport and I are involved in discussions with the Montreal Airport and the Government of Quebec and the Infrastructure Bank of Canada on reaching a joint solution for supporting this station that will connect REM to the airport. So it's very important, and we're working, we're doing our part, we're active to reach a resolution or a solution to this to the station. As far as the question about high frequency rail, this is something that, by the way, the Prime Minister included in my mandate letter. Our government feels strongly about this. That's why our government invested in a joint office between Via Rail, Transport Canada, and the Infrastructure Bank to study this initiative thoroughly, to do the feasibility analysis, and we are certainly following up on that work, and I look forward to the next step. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Zuberi. You have 1 minute.
I'll return it back to Helena Jasic, my colleague.
Thank you, Mr. Zuberi. Ms. Jasic?
Well, thank you so very much, Minister, again, having come here twice since you were first made Minister. I think in terms of the zero-emission vehicles, there's great potential in terms of improving actually the supply. You talked about a supply and demand issue, and to date, some of the real growth in vehicle purchases, at least in my neighborhood, is with light utility vehicles. And I'm certainly hoping to see zero-emission vehicles in that category. Are you aware of movement in that direction at all in terms of progress in this area?
Minister?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And my colleague is right. Canadians love their utility vehicles. And in my conversations with first my colleague, Minister Champagne, the Minister of Industry, and also with many stakeholders, with automakers, there's a recognition that there's a need for increasing supply in these categories of vehicles for zero-emission vehicles. So there's a commitment that I heard from auto sector, from the automakers, that they're going to increase supply in those categories. And we look forward to working with them on finding ways to, again, enhance and increase the adoption of these vehicles when they come out among consumers and businesses.
Thank you, Minister. And thank you, Ms. Jasic, and thank you, Mr. Zuberi.